There's been a crucial article in the Times Educational Supplement this week, which has raised a lot of controversy, opened up a lot of issues, and it seems the right time to talk about this. And of course, it will relate to primary maths because that's what I do. And as always, if you've got questions, please just interrupt, post them. I'm here to answer your questions. So there was this very controversial article where people were getting very heated about Ofsted, some very angry views expressed, and the detail of what's gone wrong. It was a Times Commission inquiry, but the detail of what's gone wrong was really lost in that. So that's what I'm going to try and explain here. It seems the right time to do it because all the key architects of what's gone wrong with it have now gone. The people we've got in power have no connection with that as far as I know. So I'm just trying to talk to them directly. And if you can get Amanda Spielman or Nadeem Zahawi to watch this video, that would be great. Hopefully they'll find it really helpful. So first of all, we need to, I just wanted to comment that their jobs are really, really hard in the environment they're in because there's such extreme failure and such a violent political surrounding to education. So I need to start by saying what's not gone wrong with Ofsted, because this is what a lot of people are saying. You know, they're just saying everyone in it is bad. You just got to abolish it and everything will be better. Neither of those things are true. There are a lot of very dedicated people involved with Ofsted, some really, really brilliant educators involved. So those kinds of comments don't help because they just polarise things and they degrade the teaching profession, that's being said. And the other thing people are saying is you can just abolish Ofsted and everything will be better, and that's not true either. You're still going to need some monitoring and oversight of regulation of education because things do go wrong and there need to be systems for picking that up. So whether we abolish Ofsted and replace it with a different body or reform Ofsted, the same issues apply. So we need to talk about exactly what those issues are. And there are two key things. One is the accountability structure for Ofsted. So I'm going to explain what's gone wrong with that. And the other is that Ofsted is being used as a political weapon to force schools to do things that are deeply, deeply bad. And that, of course, those two things have reverberated off each other because the second wouldn't be possible if the first was sorted. And so those who are coming into power need to address both. So let's talk about the accountability structure for Ofsted. So Ofsted is there to ensure that things don't go wrong in schools, or if they do, that they're addressed and sorted out. But what happens when Ofsted get it wrong? What happens when you get a bad inspection in schools that make recommendations that are deeply destructive? Now, when Ofsted was set up in 1992, this was discussed in tremendous detail, and a lot of possible models for the accountability structure for Ofsted were discussed. And it was eventually concluded that there should be three bodies so that schools could decide which regulator to use, and they were all accountable to the same framework, but if one got it wrong, they could move. So it gave them a way of escaping from bad regulation. It wasn't a perfect model, but it created some way for schools to deal with it if things went wrong. And then I've been told by many sources that some key Tories disagreed with that, so they put in an amendment the night before Royal Ascot or something like that, very late, and abolished that. So there'd only be one body and it would be unaccountable, except to itself and to the Secretary of State for Education, because they thought that would work. And initially it did, because Ofsted, when it found mistakes, a lot of money went into schools to fix them as well. So it kind of was okay, but then the money was removed and the lack of accountability over time got worse and things started to go horrendously wrong with some inspections. And I remember it because I was there and I watched it as teachers, kids' lives were destroyed. And everyone just said, well, what do we do? You know, this is a sodding disastrous set of recommendations that's being implemented at great speed. If you look on YouTube, there's a fascinating Aida song, the Ofsted song, and it describes it in detail, but it humorises the experience, and it was so brutal, so horrific. And if anyone wants to talk to me privately and directly, I can explain that in more detail, what went wrong. And it terrorised schools. And they just learnt to do whatever Ofsted wanted, no matter what that was. But it wasn't all schools, and it wasn't going wrong all the time. It's just where you had poor inspectors. It tended to go wrong more in schools with many challenges because the inspectors tended to come out of schools that had been fabulous successes, you know, grammar schools, schools that got great results. And they had little experience of how schools with many challenges work and what the best strategies are. So that was going on. But at the same time, there was an expert community discussing what was going wrong. And by the early 2000s, under the Blair government, the accountability of Ofsted was the key thing, but there were problems with all the other regulators that had been really rapidly set up in the 80s and 90s. So the government commissioned a full review of regulation, which was the Hampton review in 2004, and it came up with a framework for how regulators should operate that included an accountability structure that was put into practice in the Legislative and Regulatory Reform Act of 2006. And that said that all regulation must be transparent, accountable, proportionate and consistent, and that if it was found not to be, there were specific processes for regulated organisations to complain, and they could use the process of judicial review if their complaints were upheld to force the regulator to change its practice so it learned from its mistakes. Now, most regulation came under that quite quickly. All regulators were given a buffer period to become compliant. And by 2009, the vast majority of regulation was under this framework. What wasn't under was the Financial Services Authority and public sector regulation because it's just taking longer to become compliant. But it was on its way, and if you read the Ofsted documents from that time, they were working really hard to become compliant. They were compliant for their work in public and private schools, but not in state schools by 2009. If you look at the amendment to the Act in 2009, you can see that. So that was due to come in 2010 or 2011. But in 2010, we got a new government who stopped all that in its tracks and used Ofsted as a political weapon. So when things were very bad, they suddenly got much worse. And schools were forced to do all sorts of things by Ofsted that clearly weren't in the interests of children, were just being dictated by ministers, and there was absolutely nothing they could do about it. And so you ended up with a profession that was brutalised, terrorised. The experts were disposed of, so there was no oversight anymore. That community that had been working to improve things was just abolished. All the people were, I mean, I can talk about that as well, what happened to people like me who had the capacity to speak out about it. Had a presence on social media which was heavily managed so that ministers had no connection with the truth or the real world. And one of the things, so if I get back to, so point one is there needs to be robust accountability structures. What happened under the coalition government was that the Lib Dem control areas, the regulators were made much more independent of government. You can talk to Ed Davey about what he did to ensure that ministers didn't have the right to interfere inappropriately in the areas that he was responsible for. But in the Tory-controlled areas, it all went backwards and all power as to what would happen was concentrated in the hands of a few key individuals. That needs to change. Regulators need to be accountable. not just to the Secretary of State. It can be done, it's been proved it can be done. So that's crucial. Now, the second thing is that Ofsted then became the weapon of implementation of profoundly ignorant policy from 2010 onwards. So I'm going to talk a little about what that meant in primary maths so that it can be understood exactly what's needed to roll it back. So primary maths was given to Nick Gibb, who was obsessed with returning to Victorian style teaching, where children will improve simply because if they're forced to fail more, they will want to succeed more and they will try harder. And teaching should all be transmission teaching of curricula that are written down, and the teacher is just there to roll it out in pre-planned ways that are pre-planned by other people, traditional style teaching. And he created this fake straw man of progressive teaching, which is a profoundly intelligent art of teaching where all children can progress, even if they weren't at the previous lesson, even if they're not in a great state of mind. It's low floor, high ceiling teaching, expert maths teaching. That was characterised as being done by ignorant people who just let children sit around and do whatever they wanted. And all sorts of horrendous things were said about it. And it was all untrue. It was just a fetish of Nick Gibb, as were many other things, like his creating the youngest ever national curriculum because he didn't believe that age in children mattered for learning, which is nonsense. He got rid of apparatus from Key Stage 1 SAT, so we have lots of children doing column addition and subtraction without apparatus. Well, they all have to do it in their exams, and about a third of them are still only 6 when they do them. And it's just an absolute international horror story. But no one could do anything because you just got wrecked by Ofsted if you said anything. You know, they would arrive in your school and you'd be destroyed. And all your good stuff would be disposed of. There'd be chaos in the school. I remember at the Advisory Committee on Maths Education conference in 2012, Nick Gibb saying, I've seen this research that says that children who are brilliant at long division at primary school will do well in their exams at 16. Therefore, we're going to do all this stuff around long division and force the curriculum younger. And everyone was just saying, well, can't you see it's co-causal? There's underlying factors that cause both outcomes. And the answer was no, he can't. And he's disposing of anyone who mentions that kind of thing. So these ignorant policies need to stop coming. They need to be challenged. It needs to be accepted that they need to be challenged. And Ofsted is not just there to roll them out. Now, in primary maths, one of the biggest bits of evidence of that is this report here. It's called the Research Review Series for Mathematics Education, May 2021, and it's supposed to lead to a report that says what's going to happen as the consequence of this supposed research review. This is not a research review. This is a hugely toxic document. It makes all sorts of claims like teaching for understanding and teaching for learning processes are incompatible. You have to focus on one or the other, so we're going to teach processes. And it's just so wrong and so destructive. There's this article here, if you go to the Association of Teachers of Maths website, into their latest journal, there's a detailed rebuttal of it and its processes. So the report that comes out of that needs to stop. Ofsted, if it does literature reviews, they should be honest. But it's not. It's that toxic. It's that controlled to Nick Gibb's agenda. So that consequential report needs to stop. The tables check is a Nick Gibbism in the way it's set up. It could have been set up to be intelligent. It's not. It's there to force lots of failure, lots of fear, 6-second guillotine on every single question, and you fail if you get one wrong at the age of 8. It's just appalling. It wasn't checked for impact. No one was interested in the impact. He knew what he wanted to do and he just designed it. And it's even there in the footnotes of the document. That's not been through Parliament yet. It's supposed to become statutory this year. That needs to stop. And we just need to get back to having an intelligent conversation about education. At the heart of it is this reality that we've had forced Victorian style teaching because it works okay in a lot of schools. If your school has loads of supportive, well-organised families, the kids are generally together, the kids generally turn up well rested, well fed, and the parents will help the children or get tutors if their children get behind, it's okay. It works. I'm not trying to destroy all that stuff. I'm not trying to negate everything that's happened under that regime. There are a lot of good people in that as well. There's some really good insights have come out of it. There's some good work that needs to be preserved. There's a lot of people in that system who do much more than just parrot what the government says. But the more intelligent types of teaching, the more highly skilled types of teaching, they are so needed, and teachers need to be supported to understand them, and that all of the training that relates to them is just wiped out by all the national free training. And it's just not okay. This ignorance needs to stop. Teachers are evacuating the profession at 1,000,000 miles an hour. They're going abroad. The experts have gone. And lots just leave because they hate it. If you are working in the schools with most challenges, the schools with chaotic, teaching for understanding is essential for calming down the children. And there are ways of doing it that are much, much better than what's being rolled out by the government. Much more powerful. And teachers need to be allowed to do that. Because otherwise they're bullying children. It is horrible. You've got these children who are so tense and hate maths because they don't understand it. And that can be addressed. But the key thing is the witch hunt needs to stop, you know. I've been talking about, all I've been doing for years is talking about intelligent maths teaching. Not with vitriol for anyone, never attacking anyone unless they really, really defend appalling policies. And only for that reason. And, you know, the witch hunt of people like me, it needs to stop. If you see my videos, I'll link to a couple of them at the end of this live stream, one on teaching long multiplication that explains the theory behind the practice, one on listening to children rather than listening for children, classic progressive stuff, so people can see what it is. Just watch it and you see that it's actually just really intelligent teaching. But you know, I was absolutely destroyed on social media. I was sacked from a national job without warning. My appeal was heard in private. Horrific rumours were spread about me. And 10 years on, I still get told, oh, you know, I've been told I cannot ever share a link to one of your videos because I will never work for the government or for any of the maths hubs again if I do. And I've been clearly told that. That's what's going on. It needs to stop. And until it stops, you've got this incredible fear. And that's what needs to change. You get this Ofsted voice. You know, Amanda Spielman has been so out of order in some of the things that she said. These teachers who have worked through the pandemic to care for children and make sure they are fed and safeguarded. And she's been attacking them. She needs to apologise or she needs to go. And it is essential that the government tune into the hugely, hugely dedicated and expert bodies like through people like Alison Peacock, who did speak out. She mustn't be punished for having spoken out about what's not okay. If you need to punish someone, punish me because I've seen it all and I've survived it all and I will just carry on anyway. But much better, get me on side because if you say anything remotely intelligent, I will support it. And I suppose the last thing is, you know, in that article in the Test, it ended up with the Ofsted spokesman said, we are unapologetic about having high standards for children education, and teachers and school leaders on the ground are overwhelmingly supportive of our focus on the curriculum and our use of research evidence. Bollocks! It's a toxic voice, an anonymous voice telling teachers what they have to say. And that needs to stop too. So in summary, teachers need to stop attacking all the politicians. They're not all bad. And the people who are currently in charge aren't connected to this history that's brutalised us. Teachers, need to stand up and encourage people you respect in education, especially those close to retirement or those on career breaks, or those who've had breakdowns and left the profession, to get involved in politics. The roots of the parties need nourished. But those in political power, Ofsted needs to be accountable, and some of the most toxic really, if you're coming in, you need to scrutinise everything that's going out in your name, and you need to be sceptical of it all. And run it by people like Alison Peacock. She's got a massive network around her of experts who will give you really, really wise advice. And good luck. I really have a lot of sympathy for Nadine Zahawi and Will Quince and all that new team who are in. It's a really, really tough job. Okay, that's it for today. Bye.